I'm here today speaking with Pam Dodrill, who is the Vice President of Customer Support for Zapier. So, hi.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So just in the way of full disclosure, we're not meeting for the first time today.
Right. But it's been a long time.
It has been a long time. So we actually worked together way back at Oracle.
Gosh, Jeffrey, that was a long lifetime ago.
It was. I think we can fairly now say the student has become the master.
Let's do equal masters.
Okay. So Pam, what is Zapier anyway?
Zapier is a workflow automation tool that connects work apps that you use every day. We integrate with over 2,000 different applications. And by doing that, we build processes that automate time-consuming tasks and boost productivity.
So what would be like one simple example of that?
I'll use a current nonprofit. We were able to automate if a payment is made into QuickBooks. QuickBooks can automatically write that payment amount into our CRM system. And it saved me a lot of the first time I did it manually. And so let's just call it 15 hours of work every quarter.
Fantastic. How, if at all, has Zapier's business had to change to adapt to this crisis?
That's a really good question. You know, I consider us to be really quite fortunate because we had a model where we've always been a 100% remote company. So I feel like the biggest thing that I hear out in the world that's impacting companies, we're already around that bend and we know how to work remotely really well. We're just really looking at how our customers were responding. You know, obviously there's impact to businesses and small businesses. We have a lot of customers that are small businesses. So we've had to really watch what's happening with that set of customers and understand what their needs are and figure out how we can serve them.
You have a kind of unique seat because you get to actually see into people's operations. So what is it you see businesses needing to do differently in this situation?
That's where I can see remotes having a big impact. So there, we can see what's happening in their wanting to adopt operations between things like web hosting software and calendars or marketing campaigns. And so that's where I know remote's having a really big impact. So things that were live events are now becoming not just a web meeting, webinars, and really finding ways to communicate with their customers and their partners or audiences, whoever they may be, in a virtual manner. That, and mostly trying to find efficiency, looking to save costs. How can I keep my business operation running if I can't have my full team in the office? How can I automate some of those things?
So that's actually a really great tee up to the next question, which is, what are some of the things that you're doing, that Zapier is doing as a business to help those customers adapt and thrive?
You know, it was really amazing to be here to watch us respond. We pulled together, we could see some activity through our customer support organization, and such a brilliant team of folks started to keep track of everything that was happening, and it bubbled up to senior leadership, and we put together a response team that pulled folks from all cross functions across the company, some of which were new and had never worked together. So it's just a beautiful thing to behold, watching us generate the ideas by listening to what our customers were telling us. The first thing that started coming in was people asking if they could have refunds and or put their subscriptions on hold and or cancel them. So our immediate response to that was, okay, let's make sure we're extending. Let's just extend for 3 months while we figure out what it is that we are going to be able to do for them. And so within a week, we were able to really take a look at our own finances and how we're being impacted, and set aside a fund of $1 million so that we'd be able to provide credits for 3 months for small businesses and customers that qualified for the program. We also set up free subscriptions for the year for direct responders. So anybody that could leverage the software that was right in the line of helping with the pandemic. Those were the first two big moves we made. The thing that we did shortly after that was Wade Foster, our CEO, pulled together a panel of companies and leaders that he's interacted with in the past to put on a suddenly remote webinar where we just invited people who are interested in how to work remotely and what lessons learned might be. So those were the first two things that we did. A few other things we we released Zappy, and Zappy is a screenshot tool, and you would think no big deal, right? It's a screenshot tool. But what it does is it'll take a picture on your screen and it turns it into a URL that you can just send to somebody or embed as a photo. It saved my life when I started working remotely. So we shared that out for use by anybody also. Those are probably the top three examples. In addition to that, of course, we're looking at ways to figure out how to meet the demand of the use cases the customers are seeing now. So for example, we were talking about web hosting applications gaining in popularity. It's not just the application that's gaining in popularity. We're looking at ways now and taking feedback from our customers and feature requests on how they want that to integrate with which applications, and then talking to the appropriate partners about updating the integrations we might already have to meet those new needs.
Mm-hmm. Great. And that's very consistent with an idea that I've been talking with a lot of people about, which is this notion that helping is the new selling, that you may or may not be able to earn the same revenue right now, but there's goodwill you can earn that could last a lifetime.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you've really acted on that idea.
We have. We've always been, one of my favorite things about working here is that Zapier has really bought into and understands that listening to your customers and their feedback is how you have a successful product, getting friction out of the product for them. So it wasn't really a hard pivot for us to make. We had the mechanisms in place for listening and feeding the information. Of course, it could always get better. No one's perfect at that. But it was enough that we could really start taking some quick action that felt really lined up.
Some of these ideas of helping is the new selling also speaks to kind of the relevance of your role in your organization, because Zapier has a proportionately large investment in customer support relative to other companies I've worked with.
Yes, that's very true. And it's one of the things that attracted me to the role itself. And it doesn't necessarily even have to do with the size of the org as much as it has to do with how we run the org. And we run it in a very unique way, given I won't say how many decades of experience, but a couple of those examples have to do with the utilization rate we have. So when folks come in and they join as customer champion, we run at a lower than industry utilization rate. And what we use the extra time for is those champions investing in special projects that are either helping to create tools for support and or partnering with our product teams in an embed role, so that we make sure we're taking their feedback and providing them to the product team. And by doing things like that, we can create internal tools that track the feature requests that we get in or the feedback that we get from our customers, and then create repositories for our product teams to use. And we also do, they spend some time in collaborative planning. So as we figure out what we need to do next to get better at our role and serve our customers better, it's really the customer champions we start with whenever we kick off our planning cycle. And so their ideas, by talking to all of our customers, get weaved into the large strategic decisions that we make.
Terrific. And what opportunities do you see for businesses to actually come out of this stronger?
This doesn't differ for me in a crisis versus a different time. And this might sound a little bit generic, but it really has to do with focusing on your customers' outcomes. What are your customers trying to achieve? So if you think about the way we run business most times pre-pandemic, it is about making sure, in a lot of cases, taking care of our customers, but watching to how much revenue is going to come in. We lead with chief revenue officers. And I think what I've always believed and becomes more apparent now is the way you're going to be able to make sure that revenue comes in is to make sure your customers can thrive and grow. And unfortunately, in times like this, stay alive. And so in order to do that, you need to understand what it is they're trying to achieve. And when you can understand what they're going after, if you're able to provide them with tools that bring value to them achieving that, I think that's how you come out stronger.
So now let's extend that out to from your company to your customers and just businesses you see out in the world. This is a very upended landscape. What opportunities do you see for those businesses, perhaps the businesses you work with, to come out stronger?
Yeah. Oof. Same thing. Focus on your customer, but probably in so many different ways. Making sure you are doing your best to take care of them and your team. Getting focused. Like, what are the most important things to do? What do your customers need the most? And lay the other important stuff down. That one really resonates with me because we just had to make some of those tough choices. We're not hiring at the same rate we'd planned to. So what are we not going to do right now? And it's hard to put things you were really excited about doing for your customers down,
Yeah.
but you have to get really focused and pick the ones that are most important right now, because
Yeah.
that's what will help your customers, and that can help you through more lean times.
Great. So if there was one message, professional, personal, spiritual, I don't know, but if there was one message you could share out to the world right now, you know, that you could share out to businesses and people in businesses, what would it be? What would you tell them?
Be kind. And as you come back and as you continue, be socially responsible and human focused in your business practices.
As a customer success person who's also actually been a marketing person, because that's what you did when you worked for me.
And I lean on your mentorship a lot, just to tell you.
Okay, and I'm gonna get some testimonial footage on camera before we leave here. But as a customer success person who's also formerly been a marketing person, you advocate a different way of developing a company. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Customer success needs to eat sales.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my thinking. Like you mentioned in a conversation we had earlier, you start with a product, you develop it, and then you go out and you sell it. And that is how most startups will begin to start their businesses.
Yeah.
Which I understand from a financial perspective, you have a burn rate you need to manage, you need to get revenue coming in the door. So, but what I think I would change about it, if I could, is develop the product and do some really meaningful pilots, beta customers, you know, discounted sale customers, and have them really test drive it. Not just a handful, but a meaningful amount of them. So you can get really valid feedback from them and understand what it is they're able to achieve by using your software. What are their, I always use this phrase, hashtag customer outcomes. What are their outcomes that they're trying to achieve, and how is your software helping them? It's going to do two things. It's going to feed back to your product, but it's also going to help you to develop not just a relevant, but a truly tested marketing message. And then when you think about, I'll call it the customer success org that can be doing that early on, continuing to feed your marketing team what customers are succeeding with to develop your message. And then you think about your sales team using that messaging to go tell the story to customers. There is just a solid line of what I'll call truth through all of it that is absolutely meaningful to customers that are trying to achieve those same outcomes or similar outcomes.
Now that we've sort of touched a notion of messaging, can we talk for a minute about how you see the importance of messaging clarity at a time like this for a company?
Oh yeah, really solid. Absolutely. First, like, you can't be tone deaf. I keep hearing everybody hear that word. So let's just start with that. But the messaging and the clarity should be focused on your customer outcomes, I think, always. But now your customer outcomes may be different. And what are the things even that they may not know they need to be asking for? So really trying to think through what the impacts are to their organization and what that means to how they can use your product in their world to continue to thrive and grow.
Do you think it's more important now that messages be really simple?
I think everything right now needs to be really simple. So yes, or more simple. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot because a lot of the normal channels of communication, at least the in-person channels, aren't available. There are no trade shows, et cetera. So it's like the spark gap is bigger. And I
Yeah.
think when the spark gap is bigger, the spark has to be stronger to cross that gap.
I agree with that. And there's also another thing that I think aligns with that, Jeffrey. There's a book and it's called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And
Yeah,
I
Daniel Kahneman. I studied him in college.
Perfect. So the concept I have, as it's been explained to me, I have the book downloaded. I haven't read it yet. Is in times like this, the fast thinking. Well, sorry, at any time, fast thinking activities are like making the coffee, brushing your teeth, and slow thinking activities tend to be more strategic in nature, doing things you haven't done before, really thinking through what it is that you're focused on. And one of the things that I've leveraged in my updated planning process with my team now, which in itself is a type of messaging, is now's the time when we need to do mostly fast thinking things. We don't have a lot of energy for the slow thinking things. So messaging right into that category for me. For me to calculate the message, it needs to be something that's simple because I really don't have as much bandwidth in my mind these days as I usually would to connect dots if it's not clear.
Terrific. You've also got some ideas about how to kind of transform the sales cycle in regards to customer success. So talk a little bit about what you're thinking about there.
Oh, how long do we have? This is one of my favorite topics.
You could give us the short version, but it's fine.
I'll be brief. Well, Jeffrey, you already know this. You've mentioned I've worked in marketing. I've also spent a good chunk of my career in sales roles as well as services and customer success and support roles. So there's this unique perspective that I have that when we think about selling software to customers, traditionally it's been a sales team and a sales engineer. We sign a deal, we get a big contract, everybody's happy. And then we introduce an entirely new set of people um, to implement what it is we promise to the customer up front. And that's always been a point of tension. And I think as technology has changed and the model has completely changed, it's worth reevaluating what we're doing in our sales processes and who's doing it. So for the example of where you've got a sales engineer doing demonstrations, and then typically you'll have an implementation consultant once the contract is signed, come in and try to adopt what was part of that demo into an implementation. Even if you use the same instance, you have two different people. What I'm recommending is that you bring that implementation consultant role, in a lot of cases, combine it with the sales engineer. But what you're building in that demo in today's tools can easily become what you will implement. And with that, your sales approach can change. Like you can be talking to your customers and asking them what they need and building it in the software as you go as part of your demonstration, and then collect payment so that they're able to test drive it, which in a lot of ways we do with proof of concepts or pilot room conferences. But I don't think we structure our organizations the right way to accommodate what is a much more customer friendly and frankly, your own company friendly approach to sales through to implementation and services.
Well, having spent a long time in enterprise software, that sounds like really actually kind of an amazing idea. Sort of seems like the way it ought to be. Although I imagine part of the reason it hasn't already been that way is the difficulty and complexity of some enterprise software implementation.
Yeah,
So I imagine that having a more sort of flexible and user-friendly set of tools is necessary to actually make that possible.
definitely. I mean, and that's what I mean. When you and I were working in enterprise software, it was, I won't say how many years ago, but technology is so much different now. And it lends itself a lot better in most cases. You're right. There's always going to be the more complex solutions, the more complex clients that you're working with that won't fit that mold. But as close as you can possibly get to not being a rough handover, the better.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you guys, your whole business is making different things work together. Whereas the old enterprise software argument, the suite argument was basically it was resistance is futile, you will be assimilated.
One throat to choke.
Yes, I sure remember
Totally.
that phrase. So now we've got all of these throats that we need to connect.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that's always going to be the tug of war for that industry for sure. What a fun journey.